Let's look at some of the stories inside the papers and those on the front page in a little bit more detail. Joining me to do that is Lettice Bromsky, political commentator. Lettice, good morning.
Good morning, Rosie.
The Telegraph are leading with this same story, saying the ethnicity of grooming gangs cannot be ignored. That's the message that the Prime Minister will be giving to police. Do you think they've actually got the messaging right here?
I think that they're very much wading into sort of muddy waters here, and that the focus should absolutely not be on ethnicity when we're looking at these problems as a whole. You know, we need to think much closely about the victims here. It's an incredibly sensitive issue. If the collection of this data on ethnicity becomes key in reprimanding individuals who are committing these heinous crimes, then there is no doubt we should be doing it. But leading on it in a way that it seems like it is at the moment is sort of has the possibilities to create hate crimes, or potentially allow people to think that, you know, it might be endemic in one particular ethnic background, which it is obviously not. And these issues are prevalent across all ethnicities, unfortunately.
They are. The challenge is, this is what Suella Braverman thinks. She said that people had failed to take action because of cultural sensitivities, not wanting to come across as racist.
Yeah, and that's actually exactly what was found in an independent review into child sex abuse from last October, particularly from those high-profile cases in Rochdale and Rotherham. They found that this issue had not been tackled. And if that is the case, we cannot be allowing that to happen. But again, it's about where the emphasis needs to be here. And I think the emphasis needs to be on ensuring that we're tackling grooming gangs as a whole and not focusing on one particular ethnicity.
Yeah, being involved in sort of a grooming gang is going to become an aggravating factor during sentencing. And adults working with children are going to have a mandatory duty to report any suspicions that a child's being abused. We'll get more details on that policy later. Also on front page of the Times, Lettice, is this Brexit clash as rules are blamed for Dover chaos. And when I say Dover chaos, there's a story inside the paper of some people, school children, things on coaches being delayed for 50 hours. What has gone wrong?
It just sounds absolutely awful, doesn't it? I mean, there are a few things you want to do, but to start your holiday off by sitting on a coach for 50 hours or up to 50 hours would just be an absolute nightmare. Obviously, we are now getting a few conflicting things on this, and actually it was Suella Braverman who said on the BBC yesterday that this was not to do with Brexit, but to do with bad weather. Now, I'm sure there were a number of different factors, but to entirely ignore the implications from Brexit, particularly the ones which now mean that your passport needs to be stamped, it needs to be reviewed, has had an impact in extending these. I'm sure bad weather was a factor. I'm sure the fact that it was the Easter holidays, we're seeing higher volumes, was also a factor. I think that there are ways that this needs to be rectified, and a lot of that will be through upgrading the technology we have at these border crossings. For example, the new entry and exit system, which will hopefully be coming into place soon and later this year, should lead to helpfully speed these things up. But it's unacceptable. We cannot be having every single time it's holiday season, people getting stuck trying to get out of the country.
Yeah, Suella Braverman said that operations at the French border had been very good since Britain exited the EU, and said, I don't think it's fair to say that all of this has been an adverse effect of Brexit. It may be a contributing factor because clearly it is taking longer to process people through passport control. It is really stunning that then led to 10-hour delays. And the start of the Easter holiday was, of course, going to be a busy time. The front page of the Telegraph also has this story. We're all going to get this alert on our mobile phones when there's an emergency warning. If the government wants to contact us and say, you know, whatever it might be, some type of mass emergency where all of the public need to be contacted, using a mobile phone is going to be the way they're doing it. There are warnings that this could cause some chaos.
Yeah. So they're saying that it might cause chaos, particularly road safety campaigners for drivers, saying that it might be a distraction. I think personally that is a bit of an overreaction. I obviously do not know how loud this sound is going to be, but people get text messages, they get calls on their phones all the time. There's also a very big campaign awareness push behind this. So you will see it on motorway signs in the run-up to the test, which is happening on April 23rd. It's also happening on a Sunday, so there will be less people working. It is said there are less people on the roads. It's going to be announced pretty much everywhere. I don't know anyone at the moment who isn't aware of it. I think people are actually quite excited and sort of curious about what it's really going to show. But I mean, at the end of the day, the aim is that we should never really have to hear this siren sound again. So hopefully once we hear it in this test, that will be it.
It's a loud they've said it's a loud 10-second blast. So we'll all discover that on the 23rd of April. But yeah, the potential problems they're saying is if you're driving and it happens, that obviously could be alarming. It is supposed to cause alarm, I guess, to capture your attention. So hopefully, yes, there'll be significant signposting so people don't get totally sort of thrown by it. There's a story, I don't know when was the last time you went to the theatre, that they're reporting on a bit of a culture change of people going to the theatre being sort of rowdy, disorderly, drunk, in what's really a sort of behaviour change post-lockdowns.
Yeah, I mean, this story makes it sound absolutely awful. I haven't been to the theatre, but I am actually going next month. But it's making it sound as if it's turned into a sort of drunken, violent kind of place. And it's actually impacting a lot of theatre workers themselves who are considering quitting. Around 45% of them are considering quitting because of the increasingly stressful working environment, which sounds absolutely appalling. I'm not sure if, you can put that down to COVID lockdown or instead just people who are acting completely unacceptably. But it sounds like a sort of horrible experience to have to work there, see that. So yeah, it's unacceptable.
Well, it's people who are sort of aggressive, they're vomiting, physically assaulting staff. Why is it that the theatre, always immune from this type of behaviour? Maybe you'd see some sort of antisocial behaviour in the cinema, but the theatre, you'd think, the conclusion of the people writing the report is that people are entitled.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds awful. Some of the reports in here saying that there was one lady who was just way too drunk even before the interval, that she was refusing to leave the auditorium and was actually shouting within the theatre place. You think that the theatre, I mean, even now, I think the theatre is a very lovely night out. You'll go to dinner. I would never think of it as a place where people are going to get drunk and become rowdy.
Or arriving drunk. I think that's part of the problem.
Arriving drunk.
Let's look to Paris. Now, I lived in France for a couple of years. I lived in the city of Lyon, and everyone would be getting these electric scooters around. And they've sort of flirted with the idea of introducing them on a mass scale here in London. But in Paris, Parisians have voted to ban rental electric scooters. That is a bit of a blow to people who run those businesses. But for road safety campaigners, they are celebrating it. Is it a good sign to say no more of those e-scooters, the rental ones?
I think the e-scooters, particularly recently and over the past few years, have become a more controversial topic. There was in the US that poor woman who died after she was hit by one of them. And I think because when they came in initially, they came in so quickly that regulation and speed and whether they could go on the roads or in the parks, it was slightly slow to keep up. But as you say, in France, almost 90% of the votes that voted in favour of the ban were in favour of the ban, which is showing that it was hugely popular for this to eventually have a ban
yes,
on it.
I think the criticism is that the young people who potentially are using the scooters weren't the ones who voted. And it was 1.38 million people who are on the electoral register, eligible to vote. Just over 100,000 actually took part. So it's probably not representative of all Parisians, but tough luck. You didn't vote. Yeah, you don't get a say.
It's very true. And I think as a young person, I've definitely used them before. They are a lot of fun. But where that comes in terms of the safety, particularly in Paris, it's a different question.
Lettuce, thank you very much for going through the papers with me. Lettuce Bromsky, political commentator with Young Voices UK, going through the papers with me.